The Saya spy who saw ancient Mars. Project Stargate, Subject 001, and the Million-Year Secret. A tuxedo, a silenced pistol, a fake passport, a chase through East Berlin. Maybe an Aston Martin if the budget is feeling emotionally secure. You know the fantasy. A man in a tailored suit walks into a casino, orders something expensive, and somehow saves the world before breakfast. But the real CIA? The real CIA did something much stranger. For nearly 20 years, the United States government poured money, manpower, and classified attention into a program that sounds like it was rejected from a bad science fiction show for being too ridiculous. It was called Project Stargate, and its purpose was not to build better satellites, not to crack Soviet codes, not to train commandos. It was to teach people how to spy with their minds. They called it remote viewing. The idea was simple. A trained subject would sit in a sealed room, receive a set of coordinates, and describe a location they had never visited, could not see, and sometimes could not even know existed. The government called it intelligence work. Your average scientist called it impossible. And your local cable news anchor would probably call it a fun little psychic experiment, right before cutting to a segment about a dog that predicts football games. But then came May 22nd, 1984. That was the day they allegedly did something that makes the rest of Project Stargate look normal. Because on that day, they did not ask their psychic spy to look at a Soviet missile base. They did not ask him to find a missing aircraft. They handed him coordinates, and they sent his consciousness across space, across time, to Mars. 1 million years in the past. And what he described was not a dead red planet. It was a dying civilization. For decades, we have been trained to laugh at psychic phenomena. That was the programming. Remote viewing? That is for weird uncles, late-night AM radio, and people who own too many crystals. Consciousness outside the body? Come on, grow up. The official story says you are meat, a skull full of electricity, a chemical accident with a mortgage, a temporary biological machine that clocks in, pays taxes, watches streaming services, and then politely expires. Very convenient. But here is the problem. If psychic abilities are fake, if remote viewing is just carnival trash, if the human mind is trapped inside the skull like mainstream materialism insists, then why did the Pentagon spend years funding it? Why did the Stanford Research Institute get involved? Why did military intelligence officers sit in rooms with trained viewers and write down what they saw? And why did the CIA keep the records? Not for a weekend, not for a month, for years. The mainstream explanation is always the same. Oh, it was just Cold War paranoia. Translation? The government accidentally spent millions of dollars on space wizards because everyone was nervous. Sure, that is one possibility. Another possibility is that consciousness is not what we were told it is. Maybe the mind is not a flashlight trapped inside the head. Maybe it is more like a receiver, a signal, a frequency. Quantum physics has already made the universe weirder than any conspiracy theorist ever could. Particles affect each other across distance. Observation changes outcomes. Matter behaves like probability until measured. Mainstream science is perfectly comfortable telling you reality is a vibrating cloud of mathematical weirdness. But the moment someone asks whether consciousness might interact with that field, suddenly everyone puts on a lab coat and starts clutching their pearls. No, no, no. You may believe in quantum superposition. You may believe particles can be entangled across space. You may believe the universe began as an infinitely dense point smaller than an atom. But you may not believe the human mind can perceive beyond the body. That would be silly.
And yet, the documents exist. The man at the center of the Mars session was known in the files as Subject 001. His real name was Joe McMoneagle. In the world of remote viewing, McMoneagle became something close to legendary. He was not some boardwalk psychic guessing your aunt's middle name. He was military, disciplined, methodical, trained to describe impressions without embellishing them. That was the whole point. Remote viewers were not supposed to interpret. They were supposed to report shapes, textures, structures, temperatures, emotions, spatial relationships, like intelligence analysts with their eyes closed. On May 22, 1984, Subject 001 was given a sealed envelope. Inside were coordinates: 40.89 degrees north, 9.55 degrees west. Simple enough, except the coordinates were not on Earth, and the target time was not the present. It was approximately 1 million years ago, years before Christ. Think about that for a second. A man is sitting in a controlled session, being given numbers he does not understand, and without being told what planet he is viewing, he begins describing a landscape, a barren place, immense structures, a strange, ancient world under a failing sky. At first, he describes what sound like monuments, massive stone structures, megaliths, huge, smooth surfaces, intersections, road-like formations, pyramids, not little decorative pyramids, not emphasis, tourist trap pyramids where someone sells you a keychain, enormous geometric structures, perfectly cut, ancient, functional, like architecture built by something that understood scale in a way humans barely do. The face on Mars, the pyramidal formations, the strange geometry. NASA has spent decades telling us those are tricks of light, shadow, and low-resolution imaging. And maybe they are, but then a CIA remote viewing session from 1984 describes massive structures on Mars before the target is even revealed. That is a very strange coincidence. And coincidences are the government's favorite hiding place. Music darkens, tempo slows, becoming more ominous. Then the session gets darker. Subject 001 begins describing beings. Tall, very tall, thin, wearing strange clothing. Not monsters, not little green men, not the cheap rubber aliens your uncle swears he saw outside Reno. These beings are described as ancient, fragile, and desperate. They are sheltering inside the structures, inside the pyramids, not as kings, not as conquerors, as survivors. He senses fear, not panic, something worse, resignation, a civilization at the end of its timeline. He describes them as waiting for someone to return, waiting for rescue, waiting for a group that had gone out searching for a new place to live. Because their world was dying, Mars was suffering some kind of ecological collapse. The atmosphere was failing, the environment was breaking, the planet was becoming hostile, and these tall, thin beings were trapped inside ancient shelters, watching their world fade. If a dying Martian civilization sent out a rescue party to find a new home, where did they go? Because the nearest habitable world would have been Earth. And this is where the story slips out of science fiction and into something much older. The Anunnaki, the sky gods, the ancient teachers, the beings who descend from the heavens in myth after myth, bringing knowledge, agriculture, astronomy, law, and civilization. Every ancient culture has some version of this story. Gods from above, teachers from the stars, creators who shape mankind. Mainstream historians call it mythology. But what if mythology is not fiction? What if mythology is memory, distorted by time, translated through religion, buried under empire, repackaged as legend. Maybe the old stories were not about gods. Maybe they were about refugees. Okay, let's pause and appreciate the absolute insanity of what we are discussing. The CIA, the same agency that missed major historical events happening directly in front of everybody, was allegedly sitting in a dark room in Maryland, trying to have a psychic conference call with ancient Martians from 1 million years ago. That is not a sentence adults should be able to say. And yet, here we are. Honestly, if I had the ability to astral project across time and space, I am not sure Mars would be my first stop. Respectfully, I would probably remote view tomorrow's lottery numbers, or the KFC secret recipe, or maybe the private group chat, where billionaires decide what normal people are allowed to call misinformation this week. But no, the CIA looked at the entire universe and said, send a guy to ancient Mars, which is exactly the kind of decision you get when the federal government discovers psychic powers and still somehow makes it feel like paperwork. And that is probably why they never recruited me. I would have abused the program immediately. In 1995, the CIA officially shut down Project Stargate. The public explanation was simple. It had produced no actionable intelligence. That phrase is beautiful. No actionable intelligence. It sounds official. It sounds boring. It sounds like something printed on a report nobody wants to read. But it is also the perfect burial phrase, because it does not say remote viewing was fake. It does not say nothing happened. It does not say the viewers failed. It says the intelligence was not actionable. Meaning what? They could not bomb it. They could not put on a spreadsheet. They could not turn ancient Martians into a quarterly defense objective. Maybe Project Stargate failed. That is possible. Maybe the entire thing was an elaborate Cold War experiment that never produced anything useful. But there is another possibility. Maybe they shut it down because it worked too well. Because if remote viewing is real, even partially real, then the implications are catastrophic for the control system, not for humanity. For the system, if consciousness is not limited to the body, then the materialist cage collapses. If the mind can perceive across distance, then privacy becomes illusion. If time is not a wall but a coordinate, then history is not dead. And if ordinary human beings can be trained to access information beyond the 5 senses, then what exactly happens to the institutions built on telling you that you are powerless? Religion would have a problem. Education would have a problem. Governments would have a problem. Debt-based consumer society would have a massive problem because obedient consumers are easiest to manage when they believe they are small, when they believe they are isolated, when they believe reality is only what they are permitted to measure. So, what do you do if you are the elite? You do not burn the documents. That looks suspicious. You release some of them. You bury them in archives. You let journalists laugh at them. You label the whole thing pseudoscience. You turn cosmic human potential into a punchline, and then everyone goes back to work, back to debt, back to screens, back to arguing over approved narratives inside the cage. Meanwhile, somewhere in a classified basement, the real research continues. Different name, different budget, different office. Same question. What is the human mind actually capable of? And who is most afraid of the answer? Textbooks say you are a biological accident. Classified documents suggest something else. They suggest consciousness may not be local. They suggest a mind may be able to reach beyond distance, beyond walls, beyond time. And if the Mars session was real, if Subject 001 really saw a dying civilization on the red planet, then human history may be missing its first chapter. Maybe we are not the first. Maybe Earth was not the beginning. Maybe the gods of the ancient world were not gods at all. Maybe they were survivors. And maybe the reason we are told to laugh at these questions is because laughter is the cheapest form of containment. You do not need to censor an idea if you can make people feel stupid for considering it. That is how the cage works. No bars, just ridicule. No chains, just social pressure. No prison guards, just experts on television telling you where curiosity is allowed to stop. Music. Tempo picks up, driving and engaging. So, here's the real question. Did Project Stargate contact ancient Martians? Was Subject 001 perceiving a real memory of a dead world? Or was the entire thing an elaborate Cold War psychological operation designed to confuse the Soviets and justify another pile of classified money? Because, honestly, with the CIA, those are all on the table. And if you could remote view anywhere in the universe right now, any planet, any moment in history, any locked room, any hidden truth, emphasis, where would you go? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me what you think. Was Stargate a failed experiment, a cosmic breakthrough, or proof that the government has known for decades that the human mind is not what we were told? This is at Forbidden Origins US. Subscribe if you are done accepting the approved version of reality. And remember, the textbooks say you are just a lump of meat. The classified documents say you may be holding the power of the cosmos. Never stop questioning your origin. Never stop questioning the cage. And never stop questioning what they told you was impossible.